of the Tenant Landlord Commission. My name's David Tim, and I'm the chair of the Tenant Landlord Commission. So welcome to everyone joining us virtually today. We're authorized to hold this meeting in accordance with our electronic meeting policy because of inclement weather. There's a state of emergency in Virginia today due to the snow. If this were Chicago, where I'm from, there would be no state of emergency, but here we are. So today, I don't think we have any public comment to start off with. Rolla, correct me if I'm wrong, but I will pause for a moment here in case someone has anything to add, but I think everyone is accounted for. So we'll do a brief roll call, and so I think we'll start with Kirit.
Here.
Griffin.
Here.
Nature.
Here.
Andrew.
Here.
Sarah.
Here.
And John.
Here.
Okay, and I'd also like to recognize that we have our liaison to the county board, Maureen Coffey, here. We're very excited to have her talk to us a little bit later about priorities that the county board is going to be focused on this year, and discuss what TLC is focusing on in its work this year. So thank you very much for joining, Maureen. The first item is the January meeting minutes approval. I've reviewed, but maybe we can throw it up there in case commissioners haven't had a chance to look at it beforehand. And while we're getting it put up there, does anybody have any revisions or comments to the meeting minutes from last month?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second.
I second.
All right, all those in favor? And any opposed? All right, hearing no opposition, the motion passes for approval of the January meeting minutes. We will go straight into our first main agenda item, which is a discussion / presentation on the Barcroft Tenant Council. And I believe Saul will start us off with that. So I give you the floor. So welcome back.
Thank you, Tim. Actually, we had invited a tenant council representative, and I don't see him here unless he's dialed in.
Okay, we can delay this item if you think they're likely to show up a little bit late.
Sure. If it doesn't show up, I'm happy to talk about it.
Okay, why don't we delay it? I think if Maureen is ready, great. Yeah. Are you sure you don't need a little bit more time to prep your remarks, Maureen?
I can be flexible. Don't worry.
I appreciate that.
Tenant Landlord Commission is one of the ones I spend more of my time talking about on a regular basis. Hi, everyone. I know most of you, I would say maybe 90%, but there's some new faces. So I will introduce myself a little bit. I'm Maureen. I am one of your newest county board members. I started at the beginning of 2024. So I am 1 year and 1.5 months into this role. I'm very happy to be here. I am the only renter on the board, so I have a particular passion for the Tenant Landlord Commission. It's been a big motivating part of how and why I've gotten really involved in Arlington, even before I was on the board. I grew up in Northern Virginia. My whole family lives within about a 30-minute drive of where I currently am. I don't want to go anywhere else, but I would love to, be able to actually afford my rent and not celebrate only a $100 rent increase every year. So that drives a lot of my passion. This is going to be my second year with the Tenant Landlord Commission, which I'm really happy about. And I've also added the Housing Commission as one of my other liaisonships. And so one of my hopes for this year actually is that we can maybe get some collaboration. I know you all handle similar, related, but slightly different angles of housing topics. And so I think, building that communication and working together is going to be a really great opportunity, especially given what is happening right now, which is broadly chaos. So I'll start with actually the General Assembly session because we have had some pretty good success. My cat is also joining us, but that is not, don't let him distract us. So we've had some pretty good success. One of the bills that Arlington actually requested and had members of our delegation put in for us is a renters' rights bill that would require landlords, if they are not providing an offer of renewal to someone who is renting from them, to give at least 60 days notice that that person will not have the option to stay in their current rented unit. And currently the law does not specify any minimum time that you can tell someone that you are not renewing their lease. And so that was a problem that I personally have experienced. I talked to a number of community members who had experienced it and brought it to members of our General Assembly delegation. And so that is moving along. It's been passed in the House and the Senate, I believe, and so hopefully will be uncontroversial alongside a number of other tenant landlord VRLTA updates. They are passing, some of them are passing on party line, and so that does mean there is a chance that they will get vetoed by the governor when they reach that point. But some of the ones that we've been happy to support as a county are allowing local enforcement of the Virginia Tenant Landlord Act, which right now we all know that really the only enforcement is through the AG's office, which isn't going to happen, or through private civil action, which typically, if you are in the position to need some sort of legal help in your rental situation, pursuing private litigation is not in the cards. For some people, it works out, but for most of us, that is just complicated, expensive, and time-consuming. And so allowing local governments to be part of enforcement would be a really huge step for making sure that consumer rights are being protected in the rental housing space. Another one is expanding the eviction period from currently Virginia has the shortest time period from filing a notice of eviction to actual eviction. This would expand it to 14 days, which would be in line with most of the rest of the country. So those have passed in their respective houses. They are awaiting confirmation to pass again in the Senate. We'll see what happens, but I think it's a good sign that they're being introduced, they're moving forward, but their fate now is kind of out of our hands. But Arlington has been really happy to stand up and support those bills. In terms of this commission, I think we've been doing some recruiting. I know we have lost some of our landlord representation here. I've reached out to the Northern Virginia Association of Realtors as well as the Apartment and Office Building Association to try and see if they have some recommendations. If you all have recommendations, I would love to hear it. Maybe your own landlord is interested in serving on the commission. We can talk about it. But I know, that's a big priority, is to get this commission fully staffed up. I think it really helps with doing the work that you all are here to do, as well as making sure that all of the perspectives are represented. So that's just a little bit more niche, but important. And then for the board broadly, I will not be the first to say, and will also not be the last to say to you, that this is going to be a really tough budget year. Even before some of the federal chaos, with where our office market has been, our costs are just growing at a faster rate than our revenues are. And we're facing that. And now with the level of uncertainty about some of our federal funding, some of our block grants for social safety net programs, some of the security of employment of many of our residents, we're really starting to look at how do we build in as much buffer as we can to really focus on taking care of people. And that means, looking at bolstering our reserves so that we have emergency money for if something happens in 2 months that we did not plan for, we're not completely out over our skis and unable to react, but also really thinking about some of the challenges that we have been facing. We know that homelessness has been increasing significantly since the COVID years, and that trend continues to go up, even though we are, several years out from the onset of COVID, and unfortunately now a couple of years out from the federal financial assistance that we got that really helped with housing during that period. My goal is that we continue to do eviction prevention. Last year, I believe we were the only local government that continued our eviction prevention efforts after the federal dollars ran out. Even DC has now cut off their eviction prevention program, but this has been something really important to us as part of the housing first mentality. It is much less expensive to keep someone in their home than it is to bring them into shelter, rapidly rehouse them, and then get them stood up on their feet again. And so I anticipate trying to preserve that. And really, for me, I won't speak for my other colleagues, but my goal and my hope for this budget is when we have to make cuts, making sure we're not taking the cuts that disproportionately harm people who are already vulnerable. We know that there's a lot of people who are housing and food insecure in our community. Making the cuts that hurt those people, those are life and death differences. And so how do we find the things that, maybe hurt a broader part of the population, but hurt us a little bit less, even if it means some annoyances in our lives. I think, to me, it's worth it to make sure that people have housing and food. And so those are kind of the big picture things. We have a climate resolution that is coming up at the February board meeting that is really encompassing kind of a whole of government, whole of community approach. We know that one of the biggest parts of climate is housing and transportation. And so it really is aiming to kind of take our community energy plan, which has been really focused on climate in kind of a more siloed way, and talk about how do we implement that across every part of the government. And then we have all of our traditional site planning and gearing up. You may all have heard about, a number of big site plans that are coming. So River House down in Crystal City is a pretty big one. That has been part of the Pentagon City Sector Plan since its inception, basically, and that site alone could deliver a couple of thousand new rental units of housing. I've also talked a bit with the Housing Commission on thinking through what the appropriate balance is between more rental units and having condo and ownership opportunities. We know, ownership is not going to be the pathway for everyone, but right now the balance in terms of new building is about 99.99 rental units and 0.001% ownership opportunities. And so with the newly completed home ownership study, one of the things we're looking at is really thinking through how do we generate additional ownership opportunities? How do we get people into good opportunities for them, whatever that looks like. And, you know, one of the big things for me is that if we're not building more supply of housing, it really is musical chairs. You can move around who gets a chair, but at the end of the day, if you don't add more chairs to the game, someone's going to be without a chair. And so that's kind of how I approach this whole conversation. And we are going to have an interesting and I think unpredictable year coming ahead of us. But those are some of the big things that we're focused on is emergency preparedness for whatever comes down the pike, our budget being really resilient, and then taking care of the people who are here, because I think that is really going to have to be our number one priority here. So I don't want to take up all the time with me just talking. I'm happy to do some like questions and chatting, and I would really love to hear from you all what you're interested in the board thinking about or talking about. So I'll pass it back to David for however you want to approach that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for coming and for talking through the priorities. You know, I really identify with a lot of the things that you're saying. I know, you know, you've got us as a particular audience, so you're highlighting the stuff that's housing related, and I appreciate that. But before I go throw some stuff around, I just want to note for the record that Kristen Clegg's in attendance, and I think that's a good jumping off point. You talked a little bit about recruitment for filling TLC's open spots, and I want to thank Kristen and recognize we have a prospective new applicant to the landlord side with us today here, Adrian Tamala. I got a chance to talk with him before the call earlier today, and we've been corresponding for a week or two. So it's a timely thing. Anyway, so everybody better be on their best behavior so that Adrian decides he actually wants to join the TLC. And anyway, no pressure, Adrian. So I think the main question that I have, and then I'll give a chance for other commissioners to ask questions. But I think the overriding thing that TLC would like to know from you is what the board is looking for guidance on. You know, you talked about the General Assembly. Every year we do priorities that we pass along to the county board. I'm certain that we'll be talking about many, at least some of those items that you discussed in your conversation. But if there are other things that the board is like, you know, we're interested in this, but we don't know enough about it. That's a place where TLC would like to help out if it's appropriate, you know, and within our purview.
Yeah, I think, you know, one thing that I try and do through my own lived experience, but would be helpful from a group like this as well, is really highlighting, you know, what are the common complaints? What are the common problems that are coming up? Because I think our whole board cares really deeply, but it's also very different when you're not living through what some of the renters' rights problems are right now, or some of the landlord problems are right now. And I think just getting kind of that more 30,000 foot view of like, when people come to us, they talk about these three things, right? And whatever those three things are, to kind of help focus people's thinking on things that are really happening and not things that are happening in Austin, Texas, or Portland, Oregon, or whatever, but like what is happening for renters and landlords right here in Arlington. Again, I try and share some of that perspective, and we've definitely had some conversations where we'll get an email from a resident about, I think one of the recent ones is the technology fees that some of our corporate landlords, property management have started implementing, where you have to pay a technology fee to pay your rent online, but also you have to pay your rent online. So there's no option not to pay the technology fee. And one of my colleagues at least was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. And I was like, oh, that's really standard. Like I've done that. My roommates have done that, like, you know, and but I think if you haven't been renting in the last, you know, 5 or so years, while that became much more common of a thing, you just might not know about that. And so I think even almost like a state of the county for tenant landlord issues might be a really helpful thing, just to keep people in the right mindset and focused on the real problems.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things we worked on quite a bit last year was supporting information sharing among county resources. And so I think that's something that we can continue to focus on and consider what we could provide in terms of additional add-on value. I think like the thing that we hear about, the three things, you said three
Yeah.
things that we hear about the most at TLC in public comment is like rents, rodent, and repair. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's probably the most common stuff that we deal with. And I'm not sure that that's wholly different than a place like Austin, Texas, but definitely those are the things that I think we hear most commonly. But I want to give a chance for other commissioners to ask questions or toss around ideas, so I will open it up. Yeah, Kristen, go ahead. You're muted, Kristen.
Here you go. Sorry, I was having
Yeah.
a tough time. I was
Yeah.
fully prepared and then failed. Ugh. So this is a bigger question, I think, than just the landlord tenant commission, but something I'm always curious about. What is the county's thought process on converting office buildings into apartments as a way to help create more apartments in the area?
Yeah. So we I'll define the acronym and then get it. So we have the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative, CMRI is what I will say, because all those words are a little bit long. CMRI has been moving for the last 2 years, and I believe, let's see, November, I think it was the November meeting last year, we passed the office to residential conversion zoning ordinance and zoning ordinance text amendments, as well as a couple of other things, a fee structure and everything that allows for a much faster process. Basically, streamlines, if you have a building and you are preserving, the vast majority of this structure, you're not digging, you're not doing anything that involves like major demolition, there's now a new process that you can go through. And so we already have two submissions, I want to say, down in Crystal City. One is for office to apartment, and one is for office to hotel conversion. And we have our economic development team, I believe, just told me that we have between 1 and 3 other projects that are in conversation, basically building owners that have reached out and said, we're interested, tell us more. And so, they may not all go down that path. It may not be the right thing. What we're seeing a lot of right now is also office buildings that are obsolete, but are not really convertible. We have a lot of buildings that are built, post 1970, when floor plates got a lot bigger, buildings got a lot deeper, windows got a lot further from where people were, and those are really, really hard to create apartments out of. And so what we've seen, we have two active site plans right now on the Ballston-Roslyn corridor, 3300 Wilson and then 2500 Wilson, that are conversions in the way that they're going to tear the building down and then they're going to build on top. One of them is preserving the underground garage facility that's already there. So that does get us a little bit, both environmentally as well as cost-wise, to keep that structure there. The other one, for a number of engineering reasons, is going to be a full tear down and rebuild. So there's kind of 2 pathways for bringing those office buildings offline and turning them into apartments, but we are moving as quickly as possible. And I think, a lot of our office building property owners are very interested because they they're losing money on some of these buildings right now, and they don't want to hold on to something that's going to lose them money. And so we're just trying to work with them to make sure that the process gets us a good product, that they know what they're getting themselves into, and then we help them do it as quickly and safely as we possibly can. So that's been our orientation. I'm pretty, I think sometimes getting the policies and the zoning text in place takes a long time, but I'm hopeful that now that that part is done, that the movement from there can be much quicker.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Hi, Maureen. Thank you for joining us this evening. My question, I believe I was forwarded earlier, but I don't know if you received it, was regarding the CAF housing and affordable housing in the county. As you know, as you mentioned in your speech, the budget might be a little bit rocky this year due to federal funding being questionable this year. Are the programs that the county supports fully funded through our taxpayer dollars solvent for fiscal year 25? And will they be fully funded for 26, or is that still up for debate in the next go around for budget talks?
Yeah. For FY25, which is what we're currently in, no worries. The money we committed is going to be there. It's going to carry us through. I believe our Affordable Housing Investment Fund pipeline is fully committed. So I believe that the dollars we put in have been, or are at least intended to be allocated to projects that we know are in the pipeline. So basically they're spoken for the next fiscal year, which is fiscal year 26, and my brain doesn't really comprehend 2026 at this point, but we are getting the proposed budget from staff and the manager is going to come out at our February meeting. So I have not seen exactly where things are at, but I do know that we have expressed that that is a priority of ours. I have definitely expressed that it's a priority. I think that we are very conscious. We are very conscious that there are some things that we do that fill gaps that can't be filled in any other way. I think the housing grant program is one of those ways. And our CAFs, fortunately, anything that's built is already set in stone. Anything that AHIF has already been allocated to, all of that is safe. I don't know exactly where the AHIF allocation for FY26 is going to come out. That is a number that has not yet been shared to me. Hopefully I will know soon. But I think that's one thing that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. I know we are keeping eviction prevention, housing grant, and AHIF all kind of top of mind, though. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. Well, certainly, I enjoyed the ability to be able to schedule a meeting with Maureen outside of this. So if you do have further questions, I can bring those to her and we can discuss. So let me know. But thank you so much for coming. Oh, Kieran.
I'm sorry, I couldn't get my button.
That's okay.
Yeah, no
Real quick
worries.
question. So a couple of years ago, the crunch for affordable housing, I was on a working group and we were talking about ideas outside of what we're doing. In other words, outside of the Affordable Housing Master Plan and AHIP funding, like that other jurisdictions are doing, like tenant opportunity to own, community land trusts. I mean, I could mention some others, but is there any discussion of those? Because obviously we're in a crunch here and we need everything we can get.
Yeah, definitely. I know community land trust was one of the pieces under conversation in the home ownership plan. And I think rent to own has been a big conversation that I've been really interested in, but I'm not sure. Some of it is a little bit unclear since we don't have a public housing authority the way that other places do. it's a little bit unclear who the actor would be in terms of, a community land trust. Who would the county literally own the property? Would we facilitate the financial instrument to do a rent to own program? There's some things that are a little bit less clear because we don't have that public housing authority. But there are definitely things that are in conversation, and I, am working to get, some pretty regular meetings with our housing staff to think through the creativity on this, because there is like maintaining what we've got and trying to make things like not worse than they already are. And then you're right, like we need all that we can do. And so if there's things that other people are doing, we would love to bring them in. I know Montgomery County, Maryland, there's some things they don't do well, but they do have a pretty good finance strategy for public-esque housing. It's a really good mixed income model. And so, looking at things like that, looking at inspirations from other places, is something I, do kind of on my own. My background is in public policy research. And so I spent a lot of time when the homeownership study was coming to us looking at like, is there something that's not in here that should be in here? And I think our staff have done a pretty good job of capturing the things that we are able to do. I think there's a lot of things that, because of Virginia law, because of how we are set up without a public housing authority, we can't do. And that's where I am interested in taking a little bit more of a longer term look. I've talked with housing staff about some of these studies. I think we focus so much on recommendations that focus on what can we do right now. And I was like, I think it'd be really helpful if we have some things of like, what legislation might we ask for? What changes might we want in order to empower us to do things in the future? And so I think that's a bit of a mindset shift, but it's definitely something worth exploring and talking about. I don't know that we've gotten a ton of motion on that. And I also think, just to be fully transparent, the strain of this year and the budget, and also just the level of staff resources needed to monitor and respond to the federal situation makes it probably not the ideal time for creativity and new projects. But I don't want to like discourage that. I just also want to be realistic that like we are kind of all hands on deck already at this moment. And so it may take a little bit longer to get to the creative policy making, but it's not because of lack of interest or lack of, staff ability. It's just, there's a lot happening right now.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. Well, I appreciate all the questions. Like I said, I'm happy to follow up later. I'm not really sure what Maureen is talking about when she says the federal situation, but
if you really don't know, I would like to trade lives with you. And that sounds nice to not know, but
no
you all are
comments.
welcome to reach out to me at any time as well. My email and everything is pretty easy to find, but also David can direct you in the right direction otherwise. And so if there's ever a time you all would like to get together outside of this, in your, y'all are, I'm pretty sure everyone is residents as well. So as constituents, you can always reach out with any problems, comments, questions, concerns. I try to be as responsive as I can, but usually give me a week or so before you follow up. So thank you for having me, and I will let you get on with your meeting. I'll probably stay off camera, but listening. So yeah, I'll let you get on with it.
Thanks so much, Maureen. We appreciate you coming. Okay, I think we'll go to the Barcroft item now. Saul, are you ready on that one?
I have been trying to get a hold of the tenant representative. He's not responding, so I'm happy to take over.
Okay, yeah. Why don't you go ahead and we'll do that item now. Thanks.
Yeah. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to talk about what the benefits are of having a tenant council, and then some of the challenges. which is what we had planned to discuss, having the tenant representative so he can share his personal experience with the Barker of Tenant Council. So to start with, as many of you know, tenant council or a tenant association is formed by residents in a housing community or apartment complex. And what it does, it represents the interests of tenants or residents to the property management or landlord. And so that's a purpose, along with advocating for tenant rights, improved living conditions, also doing work towards fostering community engagement and community building, along with conflict resolution, helping resolve any disputes that arise between either residents or resident and property management or the landlord. And also, another purpose is to educate residents and to share information. All that goes to the benefits, right? Which is empowering the tenant councils, the empowering the tenants, the residents, by giving them a place where they can voice their concerns, share experiences, influence decisions, and for positive changes in their living environment, which leads to also improved living conditions. So together they can talk to management or to the landlord about any conditions that are affecting their living at the property. Also enhances the communication, goes along with that, communicating, learning to communicate with management and or the landlord. And in this case here in Arlington, also with, I guess, coming to the Tenant Landlord Commission or the county board or reaching out to the housing division. All that information is provided to the residents when forming a tenant association or a tenant council. I mentioned community building. They can do events together. Sometimes you just get together, have a cup of coffee and a cookie. At night, that's something that people like doing, getting together for a coffee. And overall is the tenant knowledge, as you all know. So from that, let me just jump now to the challenges. So as with any group, there's challenges that come up. The primary ones that we've seen throughout, it's lack of participation. And so oftentimes, and what leads to that, I'd like to also talk about that, but let's say, so lack of participation is one of the main ones. And then the other one is burnout. Usually with burnout, the leaders who sometimes overcommit or are under supported. And so that leads to this burnout. There's also conflict of interest, where leaders may have personal interest that conflict with the interest of the other tenants. There's also resistance to change, where some of the residents may not agree with some of the ideas or efforts that the council takes on. And so that leads to them dropping out. And talking about dropping out, another of those reasons is from experience, we've seen when residents or tenants come together is because they have an issue, a personal issue, or something in common that they want to resolve. But what happens is that once that issue is resolved, then you start seeing people drop, participation dropping. And so that goes to what I mentioned before. One of the first main reasons is the lack of participation that leads to that. Commitment. So that goes with that. So people have commitment is very difficult. They're busy. They may have other priorities, or along with that, it could be work or different schedules. Not all of them have fixed schedules. Like a 9 to 5. Oftentimes, they also work part-time jobs or multiple jobs, or a job that has not a fixed schedule, but one that changes, fluctuates. That's some of those things that we've seen. A lot of times only one or a few people step up to take leadership roles and organize the meetings, call other residents. And so when that person gets busy or burned out, you start seeing the burnout and lack of participation. And let's see, I had some notes here on anything else. And Yeah, they mentioned that people drop when their own issues or common issues are resolved, or they move from the property. Keep in mind this: residents are renting, and for whatever reason, whether they're not happy with the property or any other reason, or maybe work related or family related, they have to move, and so participation also drops from that. That's what I have to share about the benefits and the challenges. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to see if I can answer them.
Yeah, so I have a couple quick questions and I'll open it up. The first one is, I mean, do you have a sense of how the one at Barcroft is going? And then the other is, are you aware of any others besides the one at Barcroft in Arlington?
So there are tenant groups at different properties, and oftentimes, they're organized because there's an issue, like I mentioned before. But they run into those challenges, and like I mentioned, it's usually one person that steps up, that takes over. I think you guys have heard of, some there's a group where one of the tenants is referred as the mayor. He's the one that represents in the community the tenants, and so he's basically the one that has stepped up and takes complaints from the rest of the residents, goes and negotiates with management, and that's what I see happening at various places. Barcroft is no different. We've seen that. Participation has dropped in the tenant council. And as you see, I mean, I was in communication with the one lead person there, and he's very frustrated. He's frustrated. I've had multiple conversations where he says he feels that, it's very difficult to get people to participate. And I've talked about what I just mentioned, the challenges that people have, commitments. It just leads to a lot of frustration. Yeah.
So do you know if it sounds like maybe they haven't been meeting regularly recently.
He's been trying. So this tenant council, we worked with them for several months. We attended at least for 7 months, the creation, and then training, and then some additional support, because they also took part in the Barcroft land use working group. And so we provided additional extra support to keep them together and participating. And it was difficult to get people to participate in the working group. These meetings usually take place around this time in the evenings. And so I had the person who was invited here tonight, who has taken the lead role in the council, but even himself had difficulty attending all meetings. So we had to get a second representative to be in the working group. And so, like tonight, I guess he just couldn't make it. So. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, understood. I'm intrigued by the idea of having some like additional connection to foster public comment and to scout out issues before they become, really bad, by having, whether it be just one person or a group of people or a tenant council, by having some connection from TLC to people in specific, especially like larger communities, or whichever communities are interested in participating, frankly, but just sort of an information sharing network. And I wonder if this might be something we talk about in the subcommittee in relation to the Gold Star program, where we basically try and set up, and I'm referring to a program we've been discussing for, I think, 6 months or so, where we give some sort of preferences to, or recognition to landlords that go above and beyond in Arlington. And I think it would be worth exploring in the subcommittee whether we can cultivate some relationships at some of these places like Barcroft. And sometimes we have a lot of public comment, and sometimes, like today, we just don't have any, and there's not really any rhyme or reason to it. But I think one of our goals is to hear things so that we can report them to the county board, and another, we don't want to have these situations that blow up and become huge, festering sores throughout the community. So, I'm curious, Saul, if you have a response to that. I'll let Andrew go after you respond, but that's sort of what I've been thinking about in relation to this issue.
I do, and we are very supportive of this work. We got to start as a small tenants association that we're all volunteers back in 1992, and we definitely do support that. What you were mentioning about having sort of like a tenant landlord commission liaison to these groups, I fully support that idea. Where I do see tenant councils or the tenants coming together is usually when there's a crisis. So either when there's going to be redevelopment or some sort of work in the property where people feel that they may be displaced. So that's where I see this being successful during the duration of that. So I support that. And, if you can have someone from TLC be a liaison to groups in such situations, I fully support it. They have something else in mind, but they'll probably come back. So
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess two comments. One, if Saul, if you can provide Rhoda when the next meeting of Bar Cross Tenant Council will be, and see if commissioners are available to attend, that would be great. So
Yeah.
at least we can listen in and potentially listen in on the conversations and participate and lend any advice or guidance from our perspectives. One thing I did learn from a recent town hall I cited on that was supported by DHS was residents, I guess, regarding the public comment, David, was I guess some residents seek anonymity when they prefer. And of course, as we know, this is a very public forum. And because of potential retribution from their landlords or the fear of retribution, I should say. So that is something why there is a hesitation at times to come before the tenant landlord commission.
Yeah, definitely. That's always a difficult issue to solve, but I think, in a lot of cases, I think that's where organizations like Bugata can actually be helpful because they can serve as like a go-between, and keep the concerns anonymous while maintaining like they whenever Saul comes, I know that he's telling me what's actually happening as opposed to just being sort of like a random anonymous tip,
Yes.
So I think that, yeah, that there's definitely more we can do in that direction. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. Adrian.
Hey, how y'all doing? First of all, thank you for having me. Kristen, thank you for the invitation. And this is very interesting. I think that I do have a question for Saul. A little background, I've been doing property management for 13 years. I'm a regional manager for a property here in Arlington. I supervise 4 properties on the Columbia Pike corridor. And I also live in Arlington, right? With the tenant groups, what do you think when you talk about challenges? Keeping people in the groups, or the thought of once their issue gets resolved, they kind of like go away, or whatever the case is. Have you guys have any? How do you guys keep them active? Do you guys have some type of like list with information of people that are part of it? A list of accomplishments that each of these groups, for example, focusing on the Barker one, have done, and to kind of like also keep the ball rolling, right? Because I mean, if someone just shows up for an issue and they don't even know if this is going to work, for a lot of people that have 9 to 5s, part-time jobs, they have 3-4 kids at home, is this really going to be worth coming to this meeting? Whether my friend says, hey, you should come because the more the merrier, but is it going to be worth it, right? That's one of the things that to see if you guys have that. Also, from a landlord standpoint, I think that I've worked with Bugatti in the past. in some other properties. I think it comes down to the point of view of tenants towards landlords, and honestly not having good communication between landlord and tenants. Again, I think if you guys come out with a way to mediate and have not a town hall, maybe having a survey, so you guys can park those questions or park those issues, and then associate those people with those issues and kind of like get them all together to see which one is more important or which one they should tackle first. So like that, they're not just there for one issue, one is taking care of it, they're gone. Maybe they have like 5 or 6, and it's kind of like that, a step ladder of like, okay, we got one done, we got 5 more.
Yeah.
You incentivize them to stay, and also they feel like they're helping not just themselves but their community.
Yeah. So there's a lot in what you say, but one of the things that we did was, since not everyone could come to the meetings on the day that the majority could at the time of formation, we tried exploring a different week, because there was also there are many meetings taking place at Barcroft. Some meetings are by management, others by ownership. We also had the tenant council, and oftentimes they were like back to back, like within the same week. And so people were feeling, overwhelmed. That's one of the things we heard. And so one of the things we established along with the tenant council was a WhatsApp group. So initially it was a bunch of people that were there. Some dropped. They just felt that, for whatever reason, they started dropping even from the WhatsApp group, but there was a good number that remained. And so those, and I know that the person who was leading the group would send information, and also receive comments from the people in the group, and would communicate that to management. And some of those things were discussed with ownership. There are other instances where we as Bogata had to get involved as well to resolve. And that's one of the other things you were mentioning about improving communications. So oftentimes when participation starts dropping, there's, like I mentioned earlier, someone who remains as the lead, and that's the person that reaches out to us as Bogata, and then we step in. If they need our assistance, we fully help form the group and stay with them during the formation period, but always stay available if they need any other additional assistance. And sometimes they come back to us, they're like, you know what, we tried this, we tried communicating to management, we tried communicating with ownership, and this didn't work. Sometimes us getting involved makes a difference sometimes. Otherwise, we do provide information on other places they can go to, such as coming to Tenant Landlord Commission, which you heard sometimes from some tenants that we have referred. Not everything comes to tenant landlord unless we see that it's a major issue that's affecting many residents in the community. So that's when you get to see our referrals. Or we also communicate with the housing division. So especially when it involves CAF properties, which is the only owners where Arlington County actually has leverage on, because they have proved either funding or any or a site plan. So that's where the county can really get involved and has some leverage over those owners or housers. Improving communications, they did touch on that, and so oftentimes people do reach out to Bogata for help, or when the participation just drops. Like I mentioned, there's always one or either or some of the participants know we provide information that at any time they need help, they can reach out to Bogata. And so even if participation drops and they're not meeting as frequent, or they stop meeting, they still have our contact information. So if at any point they need any assistance resolving an issue with management or with the landlord, we help them. Yeah.
What about if you don't mind, one more question? What about the relationship that you guys as Bogata are having with the landlords or the properties, at least in Arlington? I mean, I know about you about Bogata. I think the last time I had you guys remediating with a tenant between one of our properties and myself was probably 2016, and from then to now, all 4 properties have different managers, and I'm pretty sure they don't know who Bugatti is, right? So how are you guys keeping, I think that can also help a lot if you guys are mediating for tenants, if you guys keep those communications open with property managers or, properties.
So it helps. Oftentimes, some of the owners let their staff know that there's this organization. Don't see them as rivals, which a lot of people sometimes see a tenant group or tenant council or a tenant association as they're against me, but instead more of a partners. We're here to help. So when I come into a community and I speak to a manager, I tell them that don't see us as rivals, see us as partners. And when I talk to the owners too, see us as partners, not as rivals, because what we're doing is actually providing you a service. When we come to you, it's because there's a problem, and we're letting you know. Look into this, see how you can solve it, as opposed to these things just blowing out there in the community and becoming huge problems for an owner.
Yeah,
And then
that's great.
To answer your question further is, if the owner does not let their staff, or whenever there's management turnover, or just let them know that, hey, there's this organization that advocates for residents. When we get to speak with someone, when there's been change in management staff, is when there's an issue. When a tenant comes to us and they're like, I need this. It could be something simple to fix, or something more elaborate and complicated, but that's when we have the interaction with the management staff.
That's great.
Yeah.
Are there any parting comments or questions for Saul? I think we should probably move to the next item, which is subcommittee report. Yeah, go ahead, Kristen.
Yeah, so I know we've talked about it before, but I thought we'd requested Bugatti to send us quarterly or semi-annually sort of their list of things that are happening and their concerns, their tenant concerns. Obviously be very beneficial to us, but I think it would really help Maureen as well, if she wants to know what are the top 3 things. We say rodent rent and repairs.
Yeah.
Let's have the data to back that up. And so I think you get a lot more data than we do. So I just want to put that back out there again.
Yeah, and we're happy to share that. Oftentimes, at least once a year, we come back and tell you this is what we saw throughout the year. And sometimes I break that data by quarter, so you see sometimes this is happening more often in the fall, like heating issues. Getting the heat turned on, and it depends on the type of system. Well, I don't want to get into the details, but I try to break down the data so that this provides information for the commissioners here. And I'm happy to meet with Maureen and present some of the data as well, if she were interested.
Well, it might be nice, and maybe I'm speaking out. Sorry, I might muted myself. I don't want to speak out of turn, Dave, but could we ask for a wrap up of 2024 for our next next meeting and dedicate some time to that, Saul? And then, I know Maureen can't join all of our calls, but if we had that data, then we could, David, you could share it with Maureen, and it seems like really, really great.
Yeah,
and I think Maureen just gave us a great chat. Like, let's do it.
Yeah, that's great. I like the idea, Kristen, and so why don't we coordinate on whether it's next month or the month after, or something, whatever works for your schedule. And try and make it more regular. I know we do get you fairly often, but maybe just adding some regularity to it. So
this is actually the time where I get the invitation from Rhoda, and so we're there within the time frame. So it's either March or April.
Right. Perfect. Okay, great. We'll talk about that for the March or April meeting, and I'm interested in exploring more about having liaisons for some of these larger properties, whether or not there's a tenant council. I'd like to explore that a little bit more in the subcommittee. So speaking of the subcommittee, Andrew, if you don't mind giving a report on the last meeting and what is going to be upcoming at the next one, that'd be great.
Sure. We had a great first meeting. we agreed to meet on the third Tuesday of the month. So our next upcoming meeting is upcoming Tuesday, February the 18th, weather permitting, in person at 7 o'clock. We did have an RFI out to Fairfax County. So Rhoda, thank you for reaching out with our inquiries regarding their relocation guidelines. We did review the relocation guidelines and the charters of Alexandria City and Fairfax County. So we are taking some ideas, had some points of discussion, and we're going to dedicate ideally the upcoming meeting to the relocation guidelines. And then turn our attention, hopefully once we resolve any outstanding questions, and then we'll turn our attention to the charter at subsequent meetings.
Fantastic. And as always, commissioners who aren't specifically part of the subcommittee groups are always invited to join, or if you're not able, forward questions along to myself or Andrew for discussion. Thank you for the report, Andrew. And we'll go to staff reports. Anything, Rhoda, from you or Hector?
Nothing to report tonight. So
Am I missing
Nothing from my side either.
Great. Am I missing anything on the agenda? Any other presenters? I don't think I am, but I just want to make sure because there's a couple faces I don't recognize, and
right. So Lucy Yon is representing DHS. She's from HAB, the Housing Assistance Bureau. So that's our DHS representative this evening. I'm
Fantastic.
not sure about Freddie Mejia. Don't know if that person wants to introduce themselves. Not sure.
Okay, and for Freddie or anyone else, we typically have public comment at the beginning of the meeting. We skipped it this time around since we didn't see any, but if you would like to make public comment, we can make a moment here for you. Otherwise, I'll just pause for a second to give you a second to think about it. Otherwise, I have some news that I hate to deliver, but I really want to thank Kirit for being, I'm certain that he's the longest tenured member of the TLC. I think there's no doubt about that. And he's been here since I joined in 2019 and was here for different stints for long before I was around. And I just, Kirit told me that for a variety of reasons, he is going to be ending his time with TLC. And I just wanted to say, a couple things about how Kirit has been on the commission, and then give him a second to talk himself. But I think the biggest thing that stands out to me about Kirit is he genuinely cares about all these issues so deeply. And it's apparent from the questions that he asks and the things that he says, and the follow-up. And in a time, I made a joke earlier about not being sure what's going on with the federal government. In a time when I think that there's a little bit of turmoil with regard to like federal servants, I think that Kirit to me really embodies like a true civil servant. Especially, we're all giving our time here freely. No one is paying us to do this work, and it's hard work. It can be frustrating. It's difficult. I mean, we're basically just addressing problems day in and day out, and doing it for no money or recognition. And I think that Kirit is like a true embodiment of a civil servant in that respect, and I really respect him for that. So I am going to dearly miss his influence on the TLC. He's really helped shape my view of what's possible through service, and I wanted to give him a chance to say a few words, hopefully some parting wisdom for us, and let him know that he's going to be really dearly missed.
Yeah, I'm not gonna speak for too long, but I'm a little sad because we have a lot of new members, and some people just meeting for the first time. Other people I've only worked with for a couple of years, and I've been on the commission an embarrassing number of years, I won't even say, but let's just say Barbara Favola appointed me, and Walter was the liaison when I joined. So that'll give you some idea. And yeah, the time is right for a lot of reasons, and my term was up for renewal. But I will give a couple things. I was chairman for 5 years. Kristen's the only one who remembers that or was here for that. But so the one thing that I learned is, which I didn't know at first, is that it's okay for the commission to have ideas that the not necessarily to have ideas that the staff or the county board are pushing. And I think that the subcommittees in the last few years has really helped that, because we have the time to, the subcommittees, we have the time to like discuss stuff and come up with proposals, which we didn't have in the old days. Also, you know, the one thing for my legacy is the relocation plans being confirmed on the second meeting. Well, that all came about because once upon a time, a developer came to the meet at 4 o'clock, sent like a 40-page revision to the relocation plan, and people came to the meeting and they were literally looking at the wrong copy. And the developer got really mad because they were like, well, you know, we're going before the county board next weekend, and you can't, and we deferred the decision. And then after that, we decided that we should, it's important, we should take our time. We should just at least find out, you know, at the first meeting, are there any questions we have, even if a lot of times we don't have questions, and approve it on the second meeting. So I guess it's a very small thing, but I guess that's the legacy. And, you know, the other thing I would say is, you know, we can agree if the ideas are good, but we, you know, if we should disagree, because otherwise there's no point having a commission if we just agree with everything that's presented, just because it's presented by. And I've learned a lot. I've learned, you know, how hardworking staff is. Hector has been on the whole time I've been on, and before. So, and I've seen Hector at Bugatti community events on the street. I've seen Hector at the county fair. Rolda's been on for or joined while I was chairman, and for a long time as well. And staff, they really do great work. And then, you know, Kristen becomes the longest tenured member, I believe. So kudos to Kristen. And I think that when I was first on the commission, the landlords were not very active. I'll just be honest about that. They came to the meetings, they listened, they only spoke up if it was something directly, you know, that impacted them, or you know, and Kristen joined. And I don't know if it was after that, Michael Campbell for a while, Bismuth, and all of a sudden the landlords were almost just as active, and that's the way the commission should be. It's not meant to be the tenant commission, even though I'm a tenant representative, and so that was one of the changes. So that was great, and kudos to Kristen, because you've obviously been on a lot of years too. And I will miss you guys, but I'm not going anywhere. You can still contact me. But you know, I will. Next time you see me, I will be I'll be a public comment probably.
No, I think we may amend our charter to put it in there that you can attend as an honorary commissioner at any time, or at least as long as, you know, I have any say about it, you'll be able to come by and give your 2 cents, because we'll be only too happy to hear it. I thank you so much, seriously, for everything you've done.
Also thank you, Saul. Saul's been, I've been working with Saul for a lot of years too, and I think it's a good group. So I think you guys are in good shape, and I'm not worried about the commission. But you know, the time has come for me. So,
yep.
So good luck. I will certainly miss you guys.
Great. Well, thank you again so much, Kirit. And I hope you feel free to come back to the commission at any time and speak with us. Well, I think that's all that we have for today's meeting. So, if you, I really wish we had been able to do this in person so that we could have all been there with Kirit, but I'd like to invite Kirit to the next meeting. I don't know if he'll be able to make it in person, just so, we can shake hands and congratulate him on his service. But in the meantime, if you want to get in contact with Kirit and thank him via email, you have all the commissioners have his email, so I encourage you to do that. And it's not every day that the longest tenured member of the commission leaves, and it really, he made a really big impression on me. So I thank him again. All right. Well, I think that's it. Are there any other comments or questions from commissioners before we make a motion to adjourn?
Nope.
All right.
Thank you,
Fantastic. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Kirit, perhaps?
I move to adjourn.
I second.
All right. Anyone opposed? And hearing none, that concludes the February 12th, 2025 meeting of the Tenant Landlord Commission. Thank you very much for your service, Kirit.
Bye, everybody.
Enjoy
Good
your
night,
evening.
everyone.
Everyone,
So
stay
night.
warm.
appreciate it.